And okay, now we should be recording everywhere. So, yeah, let's hope I'm ready here. Well, hello and welcome back to another episode of Sunday Reviews. You've got your host Kyle and Joe as always. Hi, Joe.
Good evening.
Oh, I forget it's evening there. It's only 3 o'clock for me. It's like, perfectly mid-afternoon.
Like it's near bedtime for me.
Oh, I hear you had an exhausting weekend.
Chasing little energetic balls of human being around the house all day, all night. Yeah.
That will take it out of
visiting.
you. That will definitely take it out of you. Well, I guess this is a great time because we just got off having 2 crazy episodes back to back. And by crazy, I should say very kind of dark issues, things like that. We did torture last week. And what did we do the episode before that? I can't hear.
Death and dying,
Oh, right. That small thing.
I'll throw off.
Yeah. So Oscars weekend, I'm exhausted seeing as we just got through most of the crazy lead up to that. So we thought it's a good time to do something very lighthearted, pretty simple that we can just bullshit about the entire time. And that is the rebooted X-Files series with this is season 10 they're on to now. And specifically,
the truth is out there again.
That's a great episode to talk about this because Mulder kind of loses his faith in this one. This is this episode's, I think it was episode 3, and it's titled Mulder and Scully Meet the Were-Monster. Episode 4? Maybe it's 4. I don't remember exactly, but
I think it is 4. I think I just looked at it, actually.
I couldn't remember between. So we'll go with your answer, and we'll say 4. But this is a great one. We start off, unlike most of the other X-Files, with Mulder.
You're right. It's 3.
It's 3?
Sorry.
Damn it.
It's 3.
I flip-flopped and, should have gone with my gut.
Should have gone with Kyle.
Oh, there you go. But this one's interesting. Mulder is now doubtful for one of the first times. He's in this one telling Scully that it's not a monster, that it's probably just some sort of creature. And I'll read a summary here so we know what's going on. Tagline is Mulder and Scully investigate an animal attack on an all-new The X-Files. When a dead body is found in the woods, Mulder and Scully are called in to investigate whether it was an animal attack, a serial killer, or just maybe a strange creature as described by eyewitnesses. Meanwhile, Mulder is able to confront some of his own demons about feeling disillusioned with his life's work. Cool. Thanks for that. X-Files Wiki. They don't have an actual summary up there yet, but I thought this was a great one. I really liked it. I've enjoyed this whole reboot, Joe. What have your thoughts been thus far?
Well, the X-Files holds a little bit of a soft spot in my heart. It was a sacred ritual when I was going through my undergrad years at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. A few of us would always gather, I think, every Friday night at 9 p.m., rain or shine, just to make sure we were able to watch the X-Files, usually enjoying some sort of alteration or two. And
an alteration.
Well, it was the undergrad years, and it was fun, and it was the X-Files. So, we had to get in the right space.
Yes, definitely. I can understand that. Do we want to talk about what a different stage in life I was at the time where I was
Let's go ahead and go back to 1996 and talk about your wild years then.
Yeah, let's talk about how I would have been, 5 years old or something like that at the time. So definitely crazy years.
Upsetting the order of kindergarten, just like Mulder.
Well, that's probably what I find interesting. I mean, I can easily say I was raised on science fiction between Star Wars and X-Files and things like that. I mean, my whole childhood is just caked with this kind of stuff, which I love very much. Still holds very near and dear to my heart.
I don't know with my nephews this weekend if I did something good or something bad, but the only Star Wars they had seen was The Force Awakens. And unfortunately, the only one I had on DVD was Revenge of the Sith. And they very much wanted to watch that. And I feel like, well, you're watching this completely out of order. You're watching the last of the prequels first. But they absolutely loved it. And, I was worried it was going to be a little scary for them once in first grade, but he was just absolutely in love with it from the moment it started. I mean, I had to tell him to sit back from the TV, like he was like three inches from the screen.
That's awesome. I love it. That would have been me. Oh my. But then again,
I thought of you and the prequels being very close to your heart. So it was very nice to see a new generation appreciating those.
Yes. Those are the ones that those are the ones I could actually go see live in the theater. So that was what's cool about those to me. I like those ones where everyone else bashes them, but.
Well, and you know what? I know you haven't been to The Force Awakens yet, and you haven't really gotten hooked on the fever, but watching those prequels was really fun. Watching one of them again, there's still a lot of clumsy dialogue. There's still a lot of mistakes, but there's some original storytelling. There's new worlds. There is something bold about what Lucas did versus, rehashing the same plot, I don't know. I saw them in a different light last night.
That's awesome. Good. At least someone feels a little bit better about them. I'm sure the rest of the world just hates them even more since time's passed. But let's maybe dive into our actual episode at hand here, because we both have an extensive history with the X-Files. So we chose an episode that out of this new 6-part series running, this is probably the most lighthearted one, I'd say. This one has this man changing. Well, he's actually a monster changing into a man. So, how about that for a curveball? Yeah, original. So, I don't know. Let's just jump into it here. I thought that was one of the cooler quirks about it. It was some very funny dialogue, and that's what I'm enjoying about these new X-Files versus the old ones. It could be that the humor went over my head as a 5-year-old and such, but I'm actually laughing at these new ones, and that's something I don't remember from the old ones. I just remember them being very dark and scary. And hi, Louie, I hear you trying to chime in there in the background. I don't know if
maybe he has an opinion on these were-monsters and being human.
He might. What do you think about being human? Are you trying? Is that what you're rolling around for on the ground? You're trying to transform? Keep at it. See if that works. I
always just wonder, what this episode kind of takes a look at what it means to be a human being and sort of it's taking a good laugh at, some of the stupid constructs and, the sort of the minutia of everyday living as a human being in America in 2016. But, what does a dog see when you're going to the fridge? Like, is he thinking, why aren't we eating all of that food right now?
Yeah. Okay, good.
Why would you keep that in there?
I think about this a lot because of how they have, a very different structure of thinking and how, they don't really, I guess, someone out there, maybe an animal expert, will tell me I'm completely wrong, but I believe they don't use episodic memory, or is it they do? I can't remember. I went to a dog training class and they explained it and it made sense at the time, but that's been a couple months now. But I just, like you said, I find it interesting because if they would eat everything in front of them if they could, so how do they perceive us not doing things like that? Just a whole different chain of thought.
Yeah, it's got to be a completely different way of looking at the world.
And what do they think when we're doing simple? Oh, it's that weird stuff. Like, what do they think of when we're petting them? Or if you touch them on the side and sometimes they don't see you doing it, do they even acknowledge that that's you at first? Or is that, to them some sort of thing touching them like a bug? I don't know. I mean,
judging from the back paw scratching away, I would tend, if you scratch them, on their back, the back leg gets going. I would tend to think they're not quite putting it all together, but
yeah, at least they have object permanence, right? That's a good thing. I
think so. Yeah, they know where their bones are usually.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a sense of smell too. I don't know.
Who knows? But no, that is actually a great point. This kind of ties into this episode exactly because this man goes through, this monster goes through the process of becoming a man. And I don't think actually, you know what? Let's just jump into this first clip I have here of the monster guy talking to Mulder. I took a good couple chunks from their long dialogue, but I trimmed them down to about a minute and a half because these are just fun little things. This whole episode's going to be fun randomness. So let's play this first one.
Did you lose somebody recently?
Yeah. Myself. I know this sounds weird, but until a few days ago, I didn't know we'd die. I mean, I always knew we could die. I instinctively knew to avoid death. But what I didn't know is, no matter what we do, eventually you end up in a place like this.
Doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, does it?
Doesn't make any sense. Nothing makes sense.
I don't mean to intrude, but you seem to have something weighing heavily on you. It might help to get it off your chest.
You mean to confess?
If you have something to confess.
Well, I confess that if life is nonsense, I just want this madness to end.
But you're not thinking of doing anything crazy, are you?
No. I'm just gonna kill you. You ready? No, not the gun, you fool! You okay?
Huh?
Oh! Oh no, I've lost my weapon. Here. Come on, defend yourself.
I know what you're trying to do. The green glass, the appendix, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to kill you. I want to help you.
The only way you can help me, mister, is by killing me. Please. Just put me out of my misery.
Okay, I had to clip that one because that's the beginning of their conversation out there in a cemetery. And to give a little bit of background for this one, apparently he can only be killed by being stabbed in the appendix by a piece of green glass. So he has a green liquor bottle with him there, and he tries to invoke a fight with Mulder, but that doesn't work out exactly. But the dialogue between these two just had me kind of howling the whole time. Like, it's just these funny little quirky things. Him saying, "You okay?" He's like worried about Mulder the whole time. Just silly stuff.
Yeah, he just seems to be like a decent creature. Like you said, he was a monster that became human. And, you know, I think one of the interesting things about this episode, he was never a monster. He's not, you know, what we think of when we say the word monster, evil, human destroying thing. And he's just this kind of sweet creature that is being tortured because he got turned into a human being.
Yeah, that is very, very true.
And, you know, it's played by Rice Darby. I almost said Rice Davies, back to Lord of the Rings. But Rice Darby, and he's just got the comedy chops. I love watching him. I know he was in the Flight of the Conchords. He played the manager, which I wasn't sure. I recognize his face, and my wife, you know, my human IMDb pointed out that he was actually the manager on Flight of the Conchords. And I was like, oh my God, I loved him in that. So that was pretty fantastic just to see him on American television, yucking it up.
That is. I mean, he did such a good job in this back and forth between them, and I ripped a couple more that we'll get to eventually, but just, yeah, kind of like you said, this kind of torture this guy's going through. We go to find out, and this is going to be in one of the clips, I believe, but he's not even a creature that eats meat. He goes around and eats insects, and I think I have this line later, but he says, no one even likes insects. Insects don't even like themselves. They just fight the whole time. How more lighthearted can you get than this episode? So...
yeah, I really like him. And I also, looking at trivia and, you know, constantly Googling things as I talk to human beings now, because that's what we do. I also realize this is not the only time he plays a were creature, because he's the leader of a pack of werewolves in New Zealand in What We Do in the Shadows, which I have not seen this movie yet, but friends of mine have sold it to me as maybe one of the greatest, funniest things of all time.
I have to say it is, because we repped the movie at work, and I got a copy of it. This was a couple months ago before it kind of went to the live public. And, you know, it was some boring day or whatever. I threw on this DVD, and I didn't really expect much, especially when this like low res film I had like started up on the computer, and I'm like, okay, what am I getting into? I found myself laughing pretty hysterically at it. It is very good. I didn't know what to expect, but I walked away laughing, and now I place who he is in it. Yep, That makes total sense.
I'll see. I feel out of the loop on this one, but my friend Michelle, who's going to join us for a Jessica Jones episode later in the year, she is probably one of my go-to comedy snob buddies that really just can filter out the crap. I mean, she's got the lineage, the Monty Python fan, Kids in the Hall, just all the great comedies. And she just told me as soon as she got 10 minutes in, she was texting, buy this movie. She said, even within the first 10 minutes, it's a movie worth owning. So
it is.
She's bringing it actually, I think it'll be next week. We actually do the episode with Jessica Jones, and Michelle's going to be here, and she's promised to bring that copy. So
hey, that's awesome. I like I've said to you a million times offline, I'm excited to do Jessica Jones, and I actually kind of started rewatching that on the side when I was bored the other day. It's like I need something I can play in the background. Might as well redo Jessica Jones. So. I
don't even know if I could play that in the background. I think I would get sucked in, much like the X-Files.
I do. Yeah, that show. What?
I'm putting down my work and rewatching these episodes again. I found myself going back to some of the older episodes of X-Files as well.
Did you? I think that's up next for me, too.
Well, my wife had started them maybe last year again, and I think she got a good way into season 1, and then probably lots of quality television came along, and that got put on the back burner. But going back on Netflix and looking at different episodes, and most of the ones I just remembered that I truly loved were just coming back because I think you talked to your dad about whether there was humor in them, and this episode definitely made me think about some of the funnier ones. And do you want to recap that conversation you had with your dad about whether it was funny or not?
Yeah. See, well, and like I said, probably a lot to do with me being younger at the time and the humor going over my head. But I remember watching a lot of episodes, but I really only remember the dark scenes. I remember Scully giving up the child. I remember them being chased by aliens that were like, or whatever they were. They had that oil in the eyes and they couldn't be stopped by guns. And I remember that being really terrifying as a child to have these creatures the bad guys couldn't, that the good guys couldn't beat. I remember episodes with all these monsters and, living out in the country and then being like, oh, now I have to go to bed. What's outside my window, all that fun stuff. So no, I don't really remember any humor from the old episodes. And I said that to my dad via Skype. And I think he was telling me, these were actually pretty funny. And I still have no recollection of that. So I'm probably going to give it another shot for that reason. Rewatch.
One of the episodes I got really excited for, and I was talking to you about this a little bit before we started recording today, but a famous episode, it actually wasn't even reshown for a long time, and people do not like this episode. It was about inbred monsters in the country, like very hillbilly type stuff, and it was set in a small town in western PA called Home, PA, which was a town I rode my school bus through every single day on the way to Marion Center Area High School. Home is maybe about 4 miles down the road from where I went to high school. So that was always the joke in our local area was, yay, we're on the X-Files, but it's about inbreeding. So.
Oh, yeah, I see here the Peacock family burying their child alive. Oh, great. Yeah, that sounds like a perfect place to ride your bike through.
It's horrifically dark in one aspect and gross and weird. But I believe this is the episode. Have you ever seen Babe, Pig in this? Babe, the original movie, and then there was Babe, Pig in the City?
Oh, I don't remember which one.
And the pig learns how to be a shepherding dog.
Yeah.
Very odd movie. But there's a scene I think it's in Home. I'm pretty confident, but I may be conflating several episodes. But Scully's trying to push a sheep out of the way and it won't move. So she says, "Ba ram you," in the magic words to get sheep to move. And it was stupid little one-liners like that I always remember the X-Files being peppered with, like little illusions, little weird things like that always put a smile on my face.
I just remember the terror of it. Let's see here. I found a BuzzFeed list, the 20 scariest X-Files monsters. I think your thing's going to be on this list, but boy, my internet is slow all of a sudden to load this. Looking through this, I remember. See this? Yeah, these are terrifying. Why would parents let their kids watch this? Dad, Mom, what are you doing? Home is the name of the episode. Oh, it is
Yes.
number 1, the Peacock Family, season 4, episode 2. Everyone, go watch that. Show your very young children this episode. I'm sure they won't mind.
Yes, get out there.
It said,
keep this alive.
Yeah, it says, no, the X-Files didn't invent the idea of homicidal inbred mutants, but man, did it tackle the trope well. Home was so graphic and disturbing that it was the first episode of the series to receive a viewer discretion warning. Each member of the Peacock family is horrifying, but whatever you do, don't look under the bed. Thanks for that, BuzzFeed. I'm just going to watch that before I go to bed tonight.
Please watch that episode again and tell me how wonderful it is, because it's one of my favorites.
Probably bring back
and if
childhood.
Scully doesn't talk to a sheep, let my imagination be. I don't want to. It's
Okay.
probably from another episode now that I think about it, but for some reason those were together in my head.
There's another monster on here they call the Fluke Man. This is the one that you see in the intro credits, that one with a circular mouth and he has the gray skin. And I remember that being a very disturbing image as a kid, seeing that.
You know, the one that disturbed me the most, if we're just gonna kind of go back, is the guy that said cerulean blue. Do you remember? It was like he had like this hypnotic power.
The term is very familiar to me.
Cerulean blue. Like that phrase was like perfectly creepy enough in the way it was delivered. That one really bugged me.
Yeah, I've probably been brainwashed by it. That's probably why I remember this phrase. Let's see what.
Why are you naked in the grocery store right now, Kyle?
Oh, cerulean blue. Can't even say it. When you search cerulean blue, you do not get anything related to the X-Files. You just get shades of cerulean blue for Google image results. Great. We'll refine that search and see what comes up. Okay. Ooh, yeah. Pusher, I think, is the name of the episode you're looking for here. So yeah, you can watch that on Hulu. Oh no. But X-Files has a very deep and long-lasting impact in my mind, so much so that I remember in I guess this would have been the late 2000, right before 2010, my friend and I were very much binging a lot of the shows that Sci-Fi had on. This would have been like the Stargate Atlantis that we talked about. I think Stargate SG-1 was on. Eureka, Warehouse 13. These shows were all airing around the same time. And I think this was just slightly post Battlestar Galactica as well. And we used to talk about how Sci-Fi had become very lighthearted all of a sudden versus what I was telling him is remembering all these scary, gritty, dark episodes of the X-Files in the 90s. So it's kind of interesting to watch that shift over time, at least what I perceive to be a shift. Could just be me growing up and only remembering the good or bad sides of it, but just remembering how different Sci-Fi had changed over the years is very interesting to me. And maybe, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm going to present a question to you, but I'm going to go a little bit of a circuitous route here. Everyone says that zombies, which are, oh my God, everywhere now, I feel like. I mean, when my 6-year-old nephew talks to me about his survival plan for the zombie apocalypse, zombies they're permanently in part of the cultural landscape now. But when they first came out in movies, people talked about them as a metaphor. And I think, thinking about what gave birth to the zombie as a horror trope was the idea that in the 1950s, everyone started moving to the suburbs, the white flight from the cities. Everybody wanted to live in the identical houses. Everybody ate the same Wonder Bread, white bread, had that sort of, heteronormative parents and 1.5 kids and a chicken in every pot kind of culture. And the idea was that zombies represented sort of that stagnant cultural idea. And that, that's what we're really afraid of, is that we're going to just be these zombies, these things walking around consuming and not thinking and not being, individuals or expressive. And people talk about that as sort of a reaction. So I guess what I would want to know for you is, like, what do you think sort of the X-Files being in the 90s and you being, a true child of the 90s, what do you think the X-Files were kind of pointing to? Like, what do you, how do you think it was reflective of of a bigger issue, I guess. Is that too complicated a question for a lighthearted episode?
No, I don't think it's too lighthearted. I feel like it might be hard for me to answer being so young in the 90s and not really getting the socioeconomic side of things. You know, I was obviously very, very young. So anything I know about 90s history is usually actually from reading it in the current, now. But I wonder, here's one thing I'll say. I don't know if this helps us get to the point of that question, but that idea that this renaissance, this happy side of sci-fi, the fact that that happened in, let's say, 2008, just to be rough, the fact that that's post 9/11 does not seem like a foreign or accidental, coincidental concept to me. That seems very intentional, that you have something very dark and serious that happened in life, so therefore people make escapist television. And that's a really common thing. I mean, there's a big study on that in the Great Depression. The fact that people had no money but spent tons of money going to see The Wizard of Oz is still one of the highest, accumulating movies, because people didn't want to deal with that terrible, awful, real-life situation. So they escaped it.
I never would have put that together, and I've never seen The Wizard of Oz beginning to end. But
really?
Yeah. It's just it's an odd thing. I've never.
You're not missing anything. Nothing at all. It's a terrible movie.
Hate mail to Kyle Dempster 7 at.
That is correct. Send it my way.
There are folks that love The Wizard of Oz, but I just never got into it. It was never something. But it is colorful, bright, fantastical. I mean, it is everything the Dust Bowl isn't it?
Yeah. And that's exactly it. And I cannot remember exactly. That was either in college or in high school, or who knows when I was studying that and had come across that. But that always stuck with me, that it grossed so much when people had so little to spend. And, so many people attribute that to people wanting to just escape their lives. So no, my way of looking at this in reverse or retrospect is I feel that we probably got this renaissance of happier shows on television post 9/11 because people were already so stressed out in their daily lives from, what the news is reporting and all this. So you don't want to turn on the Sci-Fi Network and watch Scully and Mulder encounter such hard-hitting, scary, gritty content versus, you can still have your serious and scary, but almost in a less gritty way. You still want it to be escapist. And maybe that's why, here's maybe even a smaller dissection of it. The X-Files is pretty based in reality in the sense that, sure, there are aliens, but it's also happening in your backyard, and it's kind of on this... They kind of bank on this idea that, yes, this could be happening and you don't know. But I found a lot of those other shows like Warehouse 13 and all that, you very much had to kind of suspend your belief on it. And Eureka being a great example, where it's like, oh, these are flying cars. Yeah, there's a plot, or yeah, there's a, something bad going to happen. The town might explode, but it's still very not reflective of your daily life. It's still something very out there and not something you can encounter regularly. So I wonder if in the 90s, sorry, just to finish this up, I wonder if in the 90s, was it that people were less stressed maybe, and therefore this gritty stuff could air? I don't know.
Man, you're making me think of a lot of different things at the same time as you kind of wander through. I basically asked you to come up with a thesis on the cultural impact of sci-fi in 30 years, so that's not fair of me. But it does make me. If I can extrapolate your thesis, is that we have Eureka thanks to 9/11.
Yeah, actually,
which I don't disagree with. I think there's something to that. I think that's really interesting. I don't know that anybody's saying that right now. So you may be on the cutting edge.
I'm gonna try and Google this, the Wizard of Oz thing that I was talking about, because that always fascinates me. But let's see here. What would I type in? Wizard of Oz. This is great radio, by the way. Wizard of Oz, Great Depression. Let's see. Oh, sure. Symbolism. That came up automatically in the results. The political Okay, now we're going to load. Political interpretations of the Wizard of Oz. That has its whole Wikipedia page devoted to it. I don't think that's exactly what I was going for. But yeah, I'll look that up sometime and we can bring that back around. But I
think
do.
The Wizard of Oz would qualify as sci-fi too. I think in a weird way we could maybe it'll be finally time for me to watch that.
I don't know. I mean, it's
Might be
a
fun to
hard
discuss
thing
it.
to do. But yeah, great. We'll just get right on that.
Another angle, just thinking about it as you were talking about it, and I remember there were actual discussions about this topic that we were actually in a post-news world before 9/11. That there were I remember like talking about this in college, and the idea that maybe culture and society and civilization had grown so big, and there's actually a mechanism called the news where we could sort of really incorporate these horrible things. I mean, we see a plane crash and it's just a story on TV to us, and it's nobody like stops their day-to-day business to mourn 200 or 300 people, right? Like we had gotten to that point in our society where these things would happen. And, it's sort of commonplace. We know every single night we turn on the news, there's going to be murders, there's going to be car accidents, there's going to be house fires, there's going to be, horrible to say, but there's going to be kids that die in a fire. And nobody bats an eye, really. People, watch the news, have their dinner, watch a comedy, and go to bed. Right. And people were sort of making this argument that we were in a post-news world up until September 11th. Then September 11th happens. I tend to think these sort of school shootings and the Columbine, the Virginia Tech, that kind of thing also plays directly into this, that there is a way to still make news. There is still a way to sort of stop everyone and make people take notice. And it was sort of very naive for people to even have that conversation beforehand. I remember in a few college classes, discussing this idea. And so what you're saying, if I can kind of even think it even broader than September 11th, is these horrifying things and these bad things happen, terrorist bombings, random shootings from high school kids, actual terrorist attacks. These things are actually changing the landscape. So we don't, I guess what's central to the X-Files to me is sort of criticizing the government. Is there a piece to this that makes us kind of step back and like, we don't want to criticize the government anymore? We don't want to like, were they a convenient boogeyman? And now that we have real scary things, we can go back to thinking about real scary things versus, the shadowy government conspiracies. I'm not really sure I have an answer, but it's an interesting question to think about.
It definitely is. And I thought it was smart how these current episodes brought up such a lot of the darker sides of the government spying. I thought that was smart, and I thought it was very fitting in the X-Files to talk about the dirt box planes that fly overhead and collect people's cell phone data. And that happens a lot out here in California, actually. There's a lot of police departments that have permission to do that, to fly overhead and collect your cell phone conversations. Now, in the X-Files, I believe they were actually saying, and I don't know if this correlates to real life or if this was fantasy, I don't know, but they were saying they could pick up your actual conversation just in what you're speaking on the street. I don't know if that technology actually exists. I remember reading some sort of like IO9 article or something like that said it picked up cell phone signals. Don't know about your standard speech. But I think that was a great thing for them to add into this show. And I know that you and I offline talked about how they lacked a bit on the overall plot going through this. The first and last episode of this six-parter dealt with that, the conspiracy, this kind of like the rich men controlling the world conspiracy, that they control the government and such.
Right. Well, one of the things when I was asking you about your dad, I thought you guys had talked about sort of there being three kinds of different episodes in the X-Files, and one of them being the mythology episodes, the X-Files overarching story, this shadow conspiracy, and Fox being his Don Quixote-like self and attacking these windmills. And then there was the one-off horror episodes, which were just sort of self-contained, one-off, scary, but great anthology series stories. And then there was sort of the lighthearted, let's take a joke, let's have a laugh. I mean, there was a famous X-Files where it was a he said, she said episode. I can't remember the name of that one, but and by the way, Camille Nanjiani is probably feeling like, his ears are burning or something, because, he's the one with the X-Files Files podcast, and he was actually in this episode. So if you want this done about the X-Files and have it done well and exhaustively, I would plug his podcast as well. But that's where he goes through every single episode with a guest host and sort of really takes apart the minutia of all these classic X-Files episodes. A very narrow focus just on X-Files, but by God, he does it right. But we're talking about these sort of broad ideas, but the X-Files in general, this mythology, and they revisit it in this 6-part miniseries. I don't know what to even call this season of 6 episodes, but it comes up in the first and last episode, and they try to force an awful lot of plot, an awful lot of development, an awful lot of ideas into like 2 hours of TV, and that doesn't quite work for me.
No, it feels rushed, and I feel like I might have deviated from your initial question by bringing this whole thing up, but I think it's important to talk about that. Yeah, and you're completely right. That's what we had talked about, being the 3 different types of episodes, and I feel like they went with more of the humor this time than they did with the whole than these mythology ones, these longer overarching stories, especially with like the Smoking Man and such like that. He appears. Does he appear in any of the middle episodes? I kind of don't remember off the top of my head.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think he's only first and last. So it felt like a very rushed plot. I guess we didn't actually call this out, though I meant to, but spoiler alert, that in the last episode in particular, there's a plague running virulent and rampant around, and it happens very quickly, and I think you actually called this out earlier to steal your point, but they only show the one hospital that's affecting. Like, it just didn't feel like a real worldwide, epidemic. It felt rushed and maybe even a little phony.
Yeah, it felt very staged. Like I was waiting for like a Law and Order type twist where it wasn't what they were all saying it was, and then it ended up it was really on the level of the Stand. The virus is affecting the entire world, and it's like, wait, what? This is for real? Chris Carter, did you lose it? I don't know why it was so ambitious, and to fit that into 2 bookending episodes of a 6-episode season seemed silly to me.
It did, especially because we hadn't even really heard about the plague until the last episode. Like, where did that come from?
This is how I'll sort of maybe synthesize what we're talking about, though, because I really wonder, can the X-Files, I love the humor. I love Rice Darby in this episode. I hope we get to some of the clips of him talking about being human, because I think sort of those criticisms are spot on and great. I mean, better than George Carlin. But can you have an X-Files where you don't have the shadow conspiracy? I mean, that was a huge part of the 90s, and I do see a connection. There's got to be something about pre-9/11 and post-Cold War, too. I mean, this is the 90s after the USSR, which was the big bad for America for how many decades? And, it's post-World War II. I mean, who's the big bad? Some people would say that movie Independence Day. I remember one critic said that was going to be the highest grossing movie of the summer simply because it blew up the White House. And without an enemy to fight, without the Cold War, without the big bad, we have to turn on ourselves. Then we start to reflect on our own sort of shortcomings. And that, to me, like, there's something about that with the X-Files where we're kind of, let's examine our own, let's face it. I mean, American geopolitical interventions around the globe have not always been helpful or moralistically good. And so here we have our own culture kind of looking at our own government actions and questioning, are these good or bad things? And I feel like that's central to part of who the X-Files identity. But how do you do that in a post 9/11 world?
That is a great point. And I was actually thinking about that when I said I was watching Agent Carter today, because she's dealing with a shadow organization as well. And I was, what thought came into my mind is that we all kind of, this idea of people manufacturing the events in our daily lives, these shadow organizations, I think really took root post World War II, with, all these different agencies we had created to spy abroad, and now with, Soviet spies internally. And, I think that's when we really started looking within our own borders as our citizens being up for arrest or interrogation or whatever you want to call it. And that is a great topic that you brought up, saying, post-Soviet Union, with their downfall in December of 91, 2 months after I was born. So there you go. I don't remember any of that. I'm a little too young to remember when they were around. But yeah, who becomes your big bad at that time, and how do you start portraying that to people? And I guess looking within at the government on TV shows would have been a great way to do that. So I could see where the X-Files had a place in people's homes, and probably just conspiracies in general really caught people's attention, that they, no longer have any external force to fear. So you kind of just start looking at your own people on both sides of the fence.
Chris Carter took a lot of shit, basically saying that, he in this sixth season episode was saying that 9/11 was an inside job, and kind of like going that it was a conspiracy and he was going to be part of these truther. And the way it played out, it wasn't really, it was the mouthpiece, the guy from Community on his O'Reilly report style show, basically saying that, that 9/11 was an inside job. It wasn't really the position of the X-Files per se. But if you have a show that's based on government conspiracies and you have something like a 9/11, how do you address it? How do you continue going forward with your, with everything that makes up the X-Files without addressing Islamic terrorists? I mean, he does do the episode Babylon, which is episode 5, which I was watching that one and I was just getting pissed. I'm like, are you really showing Islamic terrorists in the shadow of the Trump campaign, where he's basically calling all Muslims evil? I mean, and basically saying we got to deport, and people are saying we need to vet every person, every refugee that, needs a home because they could be terrorists. And that episode, I mean, it ended up being more complex by the time it was over. But for the first 20 minutes, I was furious that Chris Carter produced this show basically blaming, Muslims. And I feel like these questions are much more complicated and way too complicated to answer in 6 episodes of TV. Like,
yeah,
you're much better off just focusing on Rice Darby being a aware human.
Right. And we'll bring that right back around into talking about that. In 1 second, we'll play another one of those clips, but I think we talked about this just, maybe an hour ago, and saying that they might be setting this up for a whole new X-Files gang to come in. So I think you were going to ask me this question too, but I have a lot of opinions on why they did what they did with this season to try and attract new viewers.
All right, so fill me in. What do you think's behind this 6-episode thing? Why does Chris Carter do what he does? And why did they have, what's her name?
New Scully.
Lauren Ambrose. Yes, New Scully. Lauren Ambrose. Beautiful. And if you ever heard Lauren Ambrose sing, she's an amazing human being. But I've had a crush on her since 6 Feet Under, which I know I've never seen The Wizard of Oz, but you have to watch 6 Feet Under.
Okay.
I think you would love it.
Okay, we'll have to add that to my watch list. But my thought on this, as not really an expert, I'm just looking and guessing from what I see. But whenever they brought this back, the first thing I said was, why? Why are we doing this? And I'm sure it was a fan-chosen resurrection. And no, I have not really read much of the internet buzz about it. I didn't like the X-Files enough to actually read these articles that people were, bringing out when this was in production and such. I just kept light tabs on the headlines. But I'm assuming just really fan demand brought it back to television. I'm assuming that, it worked out with everyone's schedules, that they could shoot these 6 episodes, and that's why it's less than a full season, because everyone's moved on and such like that. But then like I said, I was speaking to my dad, and I said, I hadn't even seen the first one of these this reboot yet. And I said, well, did they reintroduce any characters? Or I'm sorry, did they introduce new characters that this can be passed off to? And yeah, lo and behold, they did. They brought in the new Scully, the new Mulder, both good-looking actors and actresses respectively, to kind of take over. I think these episodes... Oh, go ahead. You going to say something there?
Well, I'm sorry. I was just chuckling at, why do they have to be the archetype of the redheaded scientist, the, good-looking woman, and the super hunky guy that's into the odd supernatural things? Like, is this an FBI archetype that they're training at Quantico.
Yeah, I guess if you want to be an X-Files, if you want to work with the X-Files, you can already save yourself time, because if you don't look or fit into that stereotype, you need not apply. It's a very strict and rigorous course. It mainly has to do with your hair color. But anyway, so aside from that, I was thinking, they're probably going to try and pass the buck off to these two, and maybe I think it's a little bit like wink, wink, nudge, nudge with the fans. Like, yeah, we can't always have the Scully Mulder actor and actress on. So we're probably just going to have to give you guys the next best thing. We're going to lead into them doing it. We're going to lead into these two people. You're going to start to like them. But I think that they chose the episodes, as we just admitted, they're weird in some respects. Like they kind of ruined storylines by making them too small, where they could have, drug it out a bit. But I think that they wanted to give the new audience a feel of what the X-Files are. And I think looking at myself, they did justice to it. And I would actually be interested in going back and rewatching the original X-Files. So if that was the intention, if they were trying to hook new fans, just like Star Trek did with the whole reboot of the movies, I should say, it worked. It worked for me, at least.
Yeah, and that to me is a good comparison, because, Lucas comes out with the prequels, which were arguably terrible movies. I mean, there's bad acting, there's stereotyped characters, there's incredibly dumb shots that no director would choose to put in his movies. and there's there's some plot issues, some dialogue issues. The whole 9 yards.
I think you're saying most of it was wrong. So what was correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of bad in there. But I also like experimentalists. I'm a huge David Lynch fan, and David Foster Wallace wrote a great piece in the Atlantic Monthly, I think, about David Lynch and how he's how you make sense of sort of, you have modern storytelling, postmodern storytelling, what's next. It takes an experimentalist, like go out and do something different. And I think what I liked about Lucas was at least he, in the prequels, did something different. Now, Abrams comes back and he makes the movie that every fan wanted to see. And, I think about this in terms of rock and roll bands, too. How do you preserve what it is that everyone likes, but still advance something artistically that's interesting enough to do? I mean, if the Beatles kept singing, Penny Lane and Love Me Do, then they wouldn't have been the Beatles.
Right.
But if they went too far away from being, and too experimental, there's an argument that they would lose their fan base, at least, in our day and age. If it doesn't sound like a U2 album, are they going to be angry? And how do you sell the X-Files being the X-Files, but doing something interesting, something new?
I think they somehow managed to do that. I think that they brought in really hot button issues that people can relate to, but they made it funny enough that it didn't scare anyone off. It was just a very easy entry point, and I think they can now take that and go with it as they would like. Much like, and I think to what you were just saying, Star Trek did that with the new, like the JJ universe, where they rewrote the storyline. They didn't have to conform to the old stuff. It's a whole different universe, whole different cast for it, and therefore you can be forgiving as a fan of the franchise. You know that Kirk's not going to be Shatner because everything's different. Right. So you get to remake what you had before. You pay your homage to the original stuff, but you have that latitude to change it how they see they want it to go, without hopefully pissing off too many fanboys.
Right. If a band plays a cover song and it sounds exactly like the original, what's the point of doing the cover?
Right.
Where's the interesting spin? Where's the interesting thing? And I think, I'm not a giant fan of the new Star Trek movies. I like them as popcorn fare and shoot 'em ups, which we discussed. One of the reasons we're doing this podcast is to talk about sci-fi in a way that's more than just popcorn shoot 'em ups. But I do respect that device that he used to be able to create a universe that pays homage to the original, but does create a new, timeline. But quote unquote timeline. I'm using that metaphorically and literally in the show, in the text of the show, that there is a new timeline. That to me was genius. It doesn't invalidate the Star Trek I know and love, but it also takes it into a new and bold direction, which it has to do to be successful.
Agreed, because one, you talked about bands enough. I feel like I need to bring this up, but was previously a big Blink-182 fan, but boy, what drives me crazy about that fan base is anytime there is a Blink-182 post on the internet, whether it's, picture or whatever, you cannot read the comments without seeing people just lose their minds demanding that it is the early 90s again, demanding that they sing the exact same type of songs. And that is, I just think that's unreal. I mean, how can you expect them to do that? It's unrealistic. These people have moved on, they have kids, but yet you still want them to sing about being like in high school, having a crush in class or something, or skipping class. Like, no. These people are in their 40s. Like that relatability, they can't do it. I mean, they can, I guess, but it becomes an odd stretch. Like,
yeah, it becomes a phoniness, and that would be very not rock and roll, right?
Right. So I don't understand. Like, I understand you don't want to change things too much, and there's definitely something to be said about paying homage to your, the original, whatever got you hooked. But things change, and that's kind of, you just have to deal with change. That's how life works. Back to that start. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one of the things I definitely loved about the X-Files was it picked up on its continuity. It didn't invalidate its own storyline. The absence of their son is so huge in these 6 episodes, and it's it's interwoven so effortlessly at times that I thought that was really genius to show how these characters are still human beings, how they've gone through things, and it alludes to fights they may have had, a breakup, the stressors they may have dealt with in their life. That to me is wonderful. And I love that they did that. But that to me is where the X-Files could go more interesting to me, like a human drama, instead of trying to force this government conspiracy angle, which I think they could bring up. But I think Chris Carter, and he wrote the first and last episodes. My wife was, Googling as we were watching it and telling me, Chris Carter didn't write the middle episodes. But I mean, he's just trying to, I feel like trying to play the hits.
Yeah.
And it's coming across as like a middle-aged man, getting out there and playing, Night Ranger playing Sister Christian at the county fair. It's like, just stop playing this old song, whatever it is, like, just let it go. Show something interesting.
It makes sense. Do you want to delve? Let's do it. We're actually, I thought we weren't going to have a lot to talk about on this episode. Like, and God, we've been already on it for 50 minutes or so. So let's maybe steer this conversation back into our lizard man for a second, and let's play.
I think we're talking about how the X-Files, is a criticism of culture and how it's reflective of a culture. We kind of were talking about that, but here, literally, the Lizard Man criticizes what it means to be a human being in 2016.
Yeah, and this is your clip from earlier, the drive-through, so it's going to come along here. Or not. Why isn't it playing? Oh, it might help to press a button that would...
I became possessed. I fought against it as much as I could, but I lost control. I had to go on a hunt. I had to hunt down
a human victim.
No, a job. My craze wouldn't be satiated until I found steady work. So I walked straight into town, and rather tragically, I found something right away. Now, this model comes with 3,000 gigahertz of pixel bits. It's perfect for me. I have no idea what I'm saying, and neither do my customers. You can see from the shape of it that it's quite rectangular. Now, it's got by the end of the day, I was the manager.
Putting aside the logistics of no social security number, no references.
I don't need any of that stuff. You see, now I possess the one Darwinian advantage that humans have over other animals. The ability to BS my way through anything. I mean, it's better than camouflage.
You wouldn't happen to be BSing me right now about all this, would you?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't understand half the things I'm telling you.
I find that disconcerting.
What's even more disturbing is what I did after work that first day. I was so exhausted, out of my mind, I committed a murder.
Who did you kill?
A cow. I'd like a double cheeseburger and a large order of fries.
Sir, if you're not in the car, you have to come inside to order.
Why?
In your natural state, you're a vegetarian?
No, an insectivore. But no one likes insects. Not even other insects.
That clip there, I guess, I think that Skype noise actually came through when I recorded it earlier. So sorry about that, everyone. That clip alone, I could like listen to that every time I'm having a bad day or something, and that would cheer me up. That's just hilarious, especially him in the store. I don't really know what I'm selling, but it's square and rectangular, and it has gigabits or something.
Pixel bits.
Pixel bits. He's got some pixel bits.
My favorite part of that is by the end of the day, I was a manager, and you and I have had several conversations about the phone store as an institution. But my God, what have we become in America when we have to put up with the phone store?
I know. Don't go there ever.
I literally was standing in line at an AT&T store in Chicago, and I'll never forget this. I was next in line. The woman looked me in the eye, didn't even look away, and started talking to the person to her right. What are we doing for lunch? Just wouldn't call me up that 3 feet until she got her answer for lunch, inspecting her fingernails, playing with her hair a little bit, got an answer about where they were getting a sandwich. Next.
Phone stores are something else.
You are the worst, phone stores, every single one of you. And if you work at a phone store, I apologize.
Yeah, I'm sure
America
you're
has
sad
let you
about
down.
it too, person working there. I can't go to one. I haven't been to one in years. I've done all my upgrades through the Apple Store because it's just such a weird, scammy place going to like a Verizon store. Like you're not going to get, and they try and sell you on crap you don't need. You need this cover in this case. And well, how about we actually get you an iPad while you're here? It's like, what? Wait, no. I didn't want that. Well, at least I didn't 10 minutes ago, but now I do.
It's the illusion of customer service. Let me take your name to put you in a line. So is that better than me standing in line? Like, why are you pretending you're helpful?
Yeah.
This is all a great lie. None of you are going to help me in any way, shape, or form.
No. And I also really like his part. I'm glad you reminded me to clip this portion of the episode, but the drive-through is great. Why? Why do I have to be in a car?
Why? Why?
Love it.
Why can't I just walk up to outside and use a speaker and walk to the window and get a hamburger? Like, why do I have to come in or be in a car? Like, why is that a rule?
I actually would love to know that, especially as a guy in LA that doesn't have a car, but I have a lot of fast food establishments near me. And I'm often walking my dog, and I can't take him inside. So it's like, well, if you had a walking drive-through, I could easily go and grab my food without having to upset any of your rules. So yeah. There are a couple of those that I've seen in the city, and they are very nice. They're very convenient. I've seen them for like pressed juiceries and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to say at Jamba Juice, I remember had one in Chicago across from the theater, and you could walk up and order your juice from outside. And they actually had like a dog dish there for water.
Aww.
And then you could eat a little cup, and I think it was specifically tailored for dog walkers because they had biscuits and stuff.
That's nice.
Pups. Yeah.
That's very, very nice. Yeah, I mean, it really...
Well, if you're selling a $7 juice, you better do something a little extra, in my opinion.
That's true. It is just such a minor... It's such a first world problem annoyance, but it's like, I am upset that I can't be walking my dog and grab dinner at the same time. I have to do them both separately, which does, after work, kind of ruin your timing if you have to do like 2 30-minute treks or something like that, and it gets old.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just roll. Speaking of dogs, ooh, great segue into
Alas, I was human again.
Flip.
I went back to work, but now that I had a job, all I could think about was how much I hated my job. Oh, that's it, I quit! But I was too overcome with human fear to quit. How would I pay my bills? Without a job, I'd never get a loan and start a mortgage, whatever that is. Already I was terrified I wasn't saving enough for my retirement. What else was I supposed to do? If I haven't written my novel by now, I'm never going to write it, I just couldn't go on. So I visited a witch doctor, psychiatrist. But the medicine he gave me didn't cure me, just clouded my thoughts. And as a result, I did something insane.
You attacked and killed someone.
No, I got a puppy. I named him Dagoo. And I quickly realized that the only way to be happy as a human was to spend all of your time in the company of non-humans. We played all through the night.
Can I just say I love the name Dagoo? I really want to rename Louis Dagoo.
Actually, looking at the IMDb trivia, Dagoo was also a harpoonist on the Starbuck with Queequeg, and there's a constant there's always an allusion to Moby Dick in the X-Files. Scully's family seems to have a rather big obsession.
That's, great point. I think this was executed so well with his character and just these stories and these references to all the silly bullshit we put waste all of our time and stress on. I had to start my mortgage, and I don't even know what that is. But if I don't start on my book now, I'm never gonna get anywhere.
Right. If I haven't started my novel by now, I'm not going to. Just what an odd critique of I don't know. Somebody, I think it was John Steinbeck said, socialism won't work in America because everyone's just a temporarily impoverished millionaire.
Yeah.
There's this idea that we Americans have that it's only a matter of time before we're the most successful people in the world. And it's just this weird belief. We should all have our novels written by now.
Dang, I am woefully behind on my novel. So I guess, hey, Dagoo, remind me to start that novel later. He didn't respond. Guess that's not his name after all. But I thought that was just such a fun clip. I mean, I wish I could have clipped their whole conversation, but it was just such a long thing. But I loved it. Mm-hmm. I mean, this was such a cute episode in that regard. I'm really glad we took time to sit here and talk about it
and I love that it was so. I love that it was so fun and goofy. And there is one subplot in this episode that freaking hotel manager creepily watches everybody through the eye holes of the stuffed animals on the wall.
Yeah.
There's a weird voyeuristic and one of my favorite lines is, and Mulder goes through this plan of how they're going to have to do everything, and he says, but the first thing we have to do is get the hell out of this motel.
Great point. And even it says to the guy at one point, he's like, well, when you check into a motel of this nature, one does expect a pervy owner.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't expect good things.
Part of the landscape here. We're lucky he's not batting a light bulb in front of his mother's corpse a la Anthony Perkins, right?
Yeah. But overall, I give this episode an A+, and I'm really glad that we got to talk about the X-Files, especially it being so relevant at this moment, being that it just kind of came and went, which I'm really sad it's over. I found myself, I don't know, it's something about the marketing of it and people, the internet chiming in and saying how good these episodes were, or the fact that people were so happy about them being back and airing live. I'm glad I gave them another shot. There was a good portion of me that thought, well, you didn't like the X-Files the first time around, why try now? But I was very pleasantly surprised with these 6 episodes, and I think when I was watching, this is the 3rd episode we said, so it's about this time, 2nd or 3rd episode, I was like, damn, I'm really hooked on these. I'm sad that there's only 6. So,
well, the first episode we watched, it seemed so clumsy and awkward and revelatory in such a quick way. I looked across and my wife and I had waited until there was a couple on Hulu, and then on a Friday night, which was my ritual in college to, alter the 9 o'clock X-Files.
Altering them.
No altering these days. Altering might just be a long day of work. But coming home, but we ended up watching these episodes, and we're like, everybody seems to be tweeting and posting about how episode 2 is so much better. And we watched episode 1. We're like, okay, it's the X-Files, but I'm not taken. And then we watched episode 2 right after that. And we're like, damn, yeah, X-Files is back. That's an X-Files. That's what we're looking for.
Yep.
So I think these middle 4 episodes, fantastic. The bookends, C- at best.
Yeah, I think that's a very safe thing to say about those. What was the 2nd episode plot? Do you remember that off the top of your head?
And that was the one where the twins were separated and they had sort of psychic powers because their father had been doing gene manipulation.
Right. That was good. Yeah.
Oh, it was so good. And the birds gathering in the yard because the worms were coming to the surface. Like there was sort of a pseudo-scientific explanation of these creepy things going on. And the tone was fantastic. It was scary. It was intense. It was that one-off horror anthology show again. It's like, this is just a story, but it's, it's not a, there's not, the cigarette smoking man isn't going to come around the corner and twiddle his thumbs and be like, excellent, a la Mr. Burns. But it was just such a good episode, and it was just such a good story. Well acted, well told, well paced, everything about it.
Agreed. Well, we have officially hit about our 1 hour mark, as we usually do. So anything else you wanted to add to this? Are you happy with our discussion?
Yeah, I guess I'm most looking forward to what we do in the shadows.
Yes, that is great.
Next week. And then next week we'll be doing Jessica Jones. I have my friend working on an episode. I'm going to tweet her. I don't tweet. I'm going to text her.
I like how you think you're going to tweet her, even though you don't have a Twitter, apparently. Like, that's great that you're going to just do it. Like, I'm just going to go tweet at her right now.
It's like a 1920s thing. I'm going to tweet her, and then I'm going to move on and have myself a suds.
I'm going to go write a letter and mail it to you. So look out for that.
Look for my wire at dawn.
No, I'm very excited about this Jessica Jones that we're going to discuss. So,
and we're going to have a new voice on the line. We're going to have, we can't talk about a show that's so in depth about women, the struggle to be a woman, the power differential between men and women in Jessica Jones without actually having a woman on board. So we're excited to welcome Michelle and see where this goes.
Yes, indeed. Okay, I guess with that being said, I should give everyone the rundown of our usual stuff. Thank you all for joining us again. This one, apologies for my webcam. If anyone is watching this on YouTube or Twitch or whatever, it looks like shit, but I don't know what that's about. That's technical difficulties as usual. But if you like the show, you liked what we talked about, give us a 5-star review on iTunes. And better yet, you can go ahead and share this episode with a friend. Get us some more followers. Get people discussing it. You can always send over your thoughts or suggestions for episodes for us to look at, themes, whatever you want. We'll bring it up on the show. Just send it over to the howorignalpodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet it to me if you're, those are all links are everywhere. So Kyle Dempster 7 on Twitter. But thank you very, very much. It was a great episode. Joe, I'm really glad we got around to this one. So I guess we will catch up next week with some Jessica Jones. And I'll play us out now. Bye.
Bye.